Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are gathered here today to explore how we can collaborate around interoperability. And I want to welcome all of you and thank you for joining us here today. I am Evo Heyning. I am co-chair at Open Metaverse Interoperability, a community group as part of W3C. And I am also a creator, a producer, and someone who has been working in these spaces for about 17, 18 years. So we're going to explore a little bit of an inquiry-based approach to how we can collaborate across these new public commons, recognizing that while many of us have been building products or relatively closed ecosystems or products, we are also sorting out how those ecosystems and products are going to be working together in order to form something that is available for everyone. And in this case, interoperability is interpersonal. And so we very much wanted to bring people together with an inquiry-based approach, just to listen and hear what you're working on, hear where you've been, what you've discovered, some of the how, especially of what you're working on right now in terms of interoperability, and maybe where some of those connections can be more clearly made between all of the players in our ecosystem. So whether you are on that more front-facing end, or you are an infrastructure, decentralized media first, people working on interface hardware, we see this as being a collaborative effort. And specifically, we're going to discuss a number of elements in which the full stack come together to drive interoperability. And that's going to touch things like identity, our social graph, and what John Radoff is saying here around portable collaborative communities, basically how we move across the metaverse. And that looks like many different things to many different people. So we're here to explore what that can look like. Obviously, we want to reduce the pain, reduce the friction, and make it easier for people to do things together, to collaborate. Tony Parisi could not be here with us today, but I just wanted to preface what we're working on here today with these 7 rules, because I think it does help us begin to frame one way of looking at this landscape. Obviously, there are some discussion around whether these are appropriate, but we can have that conversation elsewhere. Tony could not join us, but understands that what we're doing here in terms of interoperability needs to be an ongoing conversation and an exploration. This is R&D, this is inquiry. And at this stage, we're trying to figure out what's going to work. So this is one of our colleagues at OMI, Jin, and you're going to see a little bit of Jin's work today, but this is a recent filming inside a virtual world of a show that is coming up. And I wanted you to be able to see some of the R&D that's happening from within our community. This is including avatar interoperability and interface strategies, accessibility strategies, being able to move across the metaverse in more than one form, and how to do that safely. So we're going to describe some of those things today. I'm going to stop screen sharing now because we're going to begin framing this larger conversation with all of you. And I just want to welcome you and thank you for joining us. Many of you are going to be sharing a few minutes of what you've been working on. The big questions you're holding are important to us here today. So this is an inquiry-based approach. We're not going to have all the answers today. This is a start of a conversation that we want to bring together over the next few months. And that includes all of our friends at different platforms, all of our friends at hardware companies, and all of those social graph endeavors that are happening both independently and within your teams. So let's see what we can do to inspire and connect each other. From all of us at OMI, I will be creating a number of interoperability awards, and we are going to continue to do those open demos with this community. And we're going to be inviting you to participate in that in a number of ways. I am going to be passing off to Ben, and Ben is going to be sharing a bit of the video footage that we've seen, both from the independent side, from Jin and others in our communities who are working on interoperability from an independent R&D point of view, but also from Marc Zuckerberg's conversations yesterday on why this public commons is converging now and our roles within it. So Ben, if you want to go ahead and take it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today is the 52nd anniversary of the first time a message was sent across ARPANET, the network that became the internet. And this is a particularly auspicious moment because of the announcements that Meta made yesterday around interoperability in the metaverse. That is what we're here to talk about. I'm Ben Erwin, and this series of events is designed to bring together the stakeholders of the metaverse around one agenda item, what we call metaversal traversal. We're here because we believe that enabling the ability to travel between experiences across platforms is a fundamental requirement for achieving the metaverse. And it's a point of agreement that we can build industry consensus around because it touches all the problems that we need to solve. We have assembled some of the great minds and leaders of the metaverse here today to express support for the simple concept that virtual worlds and the layers of the AR cloud need to be accessible, shared experiences that are easy to move between together. In order to make this possible, the more challenging technical infrastructure issues of identity, avatar portability, safety, security, and privacy need to be solved. And we believe that this begins with a simple agreement for all parties, large and small, to work together to solve for this feature. So I'm going to now roll a highlight reel of a minute and a half of some of the statements Mark Zuckerberg made yesterday. And then I'm going to follow that with some video that Jen kindly provided us with that actually demonstrates site-to-site traversal, site-to-app traversal, app-to-app traversal. And then finally, we're going to show Chris Madsen and Ryan Engle showing the journey from Engage to ProPutt. So here we go. And
teleporting around the metaverse is going to be like clicking a link on the internet. It's an open standard. In order to unlock the potential of the metaverse, there needs to be interoperability. That goes beyond just taking your avatar and digital items across different apps and experiences, which you're already building an API to support. You want to know that when you buy something or create something, that your items will be useful in a lot of contexts, and you're not going to be locked into one world or platform. You want to know that you own your items, not a platform. And this is going to require not just technical work, like some of the important projects that are going on around crypto and NFTs in the community. It's also going to take ecosystem building, norm setting, and new forms of governance. And this is something that we're really going to focus on. Privacy and safety need to be built into the metaverse from day one. You'll get to decide when you want to be with other people, when you want to block someone from appearing in your space, or when you want to take a break and teleport to a private bubble to be alone. And these are some of the basic concepts for the metaverse. And while this may sound like science fiction, we're starting to see a lot of these technologies coming together. In the next 5 or 10 years, a lot of this is going to be mainstream. Is that if we all work at it, within the next decade, the metaverse will reach 1 billion people, host hundreds of billions of dollars of digital commerce, and support jobs for millions of creators and developers. Teleport.
to the Ready Player Golf Clubhouse? Come on inside. Let's go check this out. Player Golf Clubhouse? Come on inside. Let's go check this out. So, Ryan, as you know, we've been having an absolute blast being partnered with you guys and creating the ability here on Engage in cooperation with your development team to create these metaversal portals that allow us to teleport ourselves from the Engage platform straight into ProPutt. And it used to be that we would connect on Zoom, do our introductions, get the code, and then jump into ProPutt and find each other and play our game. But what we're able to do now is hang out, watch videos, have some virtual beers, network to our heart's content, and then when anybody is ready, they can, pair up or go in as a foursome and walk through any of these doors that you see lining this clubhouse and hop straight on to that golf course. Which I really think this is what consumers want, is this ability to hop from place to place to place seamlessly with as little friction as possible. Because, here at Engage, we don't have any golf courses. Having that option to be able to jump into an experience like that from here is just absolutely amazing for us. And we've just been having a blast with it.
Hey, Chris. Welcome to ProPutt.
Awesome.
We made it. We came all the way from Engage to ProPutt. And what's so interesting about this solution for me and my team is that Engage is such a great way to coordinate a large group of people. So instead of us as devs having to come up with a solution to support big groups of people, we're able to leverage a product like Engage so that people can meet in the clubhouse on their own time. As soon as they have, 2 or 4 people ready, they can all hop into whatever course they want. We ended up building very little tech to support this, thanks to the Facebook APIs that support deep linking. And here we are on the course together. And when we're done, we can head right back to the clubhouse.
I think this is the future of VR. The real point here is every platform offers something unique and different from other platforms. And we need choice. It's always, people get surprised when I say we all need to be working together, but it's like, on Main Street, you got 20 different bars. One bar is known for karaoke. One bar is known for their drinks. It's like everybody offers something, and there's no, in my opinion, no need to be afraid to work together, that we're giving consumers and users what they want, the ability to choose and go where they want to go seamlessly, effortlessly, and have that interoperability. That's basically what that's about.
And if I can add to that, I agree with you, Chris, but also a rising tide lifts all ships, I think is what it is. Our industry is still super growing. We need to make it grow before we worry about competition.
Evo, back to you.
All right, so we have a whole slew of amazing speakers who are going to be joining us here today, and I want to just sort of prompt them. And Ben, do you happen to have the schedule or who we have speaking here today? Because I want to just prompt and introduce some of those folks for you.
Give me one moment here.
Great. And I want to say, for those of you I haven't met in person yet, it's an honor, and I'm glad we get to connect here. Terry, I saw that wave, and I hope we get a chance to meet in person at some point. We are going to be exploring a number of these examples at this stage of what's working inside your organizations, maybe what you've been working on in terms of R&D, or the big questions that you're holding in terms of partnerships development, collaboration, where experimentation needs to move forward with others here potentially. We hope that you will keep this as open-ended as possible as we move forward here. So we are going to be starting with a much more independent development approach from the community at Open Metaverse Interoperability, and Robert Long, my colleague there, who is my both co-chair, but has been a tremendous leader in terms of figuring out those handshakes, those nuts and bolts conversations, and making sure that we approach this work both with hearts that care for others and keep human rights, ethics, care for the whole as part of our our view, no matter what we are creating in this space. So we're going to hear from Robert. We will hear from our co-conveners here, including Terry at Deutsche Telekom, Neil from Khronos Group, and specifically around how Khronos is approaching these sort of ongoing issues around interoperability and extending our capacities in code. Chris Wilson from W3C. We have Dr. Yu from IEEE, Patrick from Cesium, Marc from Epic, and then I believe we have a few others on the second page. Alina, OpenAR Cloud, Dr. June from Futurewei. Thank you for making time to be here with us all the way from the other side of this planet from here. Kent, and thank you, Kent, for being able to make time today. Daniel and the Virtual World Society, Avi and Reality Prime, and then we will bring this back together and wrap up and look at where some of those pieces are beginning to connect and next steps. So I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Robert, as he is ready, and we'll hear a little bit more from that community-driven side. And as I mentioned before, we are both doing demo nights and hacks, ongoing hackathon and R&D community-driven experiences. So we welcome you to participate in those. So Robert, now I'm going to pass it to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Evo. So my name is Robert Long. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Open Metaverse Interoperability Group, along with Jesse Alton and your host, Evo. At OMI, our group is working on bridging virtual worlds by developing standards and empowering people, making an open and interoperable metaverse. So one of the key pieces to the open metaverse is portals, links, bridges between various platforms and their virtual worlds. Currently, the largest social 3D applications are mostly closed ecosystems. In the first video, or with Jen's video, you saw the M3 group, one of their world hopping field trips. Through their own research and ingenuity, they were able to route their way through the worlds of Anarchy Arcade, Mozilla Hubs, Janus VR, Crypto Voxels, Anyland, High Fidelity, and VR Chat. But these paths had to be carefully planned. Their identities were not always preserved between hops, sometimes even prompting a user to log in. And many are challenging or impossible to do while staying in VR. Definitely not possible in standalone VR. The future of portals in the metaverse needs to solve these issues at multiple layers for smooth, delightful transitions. We need collaboration between operating system vendors, game engine developers, web browsers, and application developers. In the same way we got together to standardize hyperlinks for the World Wide Web or deep links and protocol handlers into various levels of our software stack, we need to come together to build the hyperlinks of the metaverse. These hyperlinks are not going to work on their own. We need metadata for these portals to render and function properly. We could need things like 360-degree images to render 3D thumbnails or use in a portal rendering effect. We'll also probably want metadata for providing accessibility hints to know where we're traveling next. In an ideal world, we'll want these links to instantly load in their respective programs, but if you don't already have it, you'll need to know where and how to fetch it. Given that these links can refer to 3D space instead of a section on a web page, we'll need to be able to reference waypoints or 3D coordinates. And if you want these to work for AR, you'll need to handle the real world too. In the world of hopping demo, the group traversed various platforms with login requirements, or in some cases, their identity was lost. While this is probably out of scope for the work required for portals, it'll be interesting to see how we handle identity and authentication across these boundaries. Now, this is probably sounding like a lot of work, and it is, but the web wasn't built in a day, and neither will the metaverse. Together with hard work, patience, collaboration, and compromise, we can create this foundational piece of the open metaverse. And that's all I have for you today, and I'm looking forward to working with you all.
And Robert, if anyone wants to join us there, that would be at omigroup.org. You are also welcome to jump into our Discord or our Git if you are interested in exploring more of that R&D and how we can potentially collaborate.
Thanks again.
Thank you. And thank you, Terry, for joining us.
Hi, everybody. Give me a second. I'll share my screen. Figure out how to use the button eventually, I promise. Okay, there we go. So, those of you who don't know me, my name is Terry Schussler, and I'm the Senior Director of Spatial Computing at Deutsche Telekom. I've been involved in XR for about a decade this time around, and then I was also involved early on with the nascent efforts in the late 80s and early 90s. I was one of the founding employees of Macromind, which became Macromedia after it lost its mind. That's an old joke, but it still works. Anyway, so I'm coming at this initiative with Ben, both as a developer of software for 40 years and also as a user. And thinking from the telco perspective, what can we do to enable a better user experience? Thinking users first, not last, in terms of the work that we do. So I've kind of just quickly highlighted, what are the important priorities that we're working on that will lean into the concepts of the MetaDavos effort. And just to highlight, in the few minutes that I have here, what I think are the things that we can contribute to make that more viable. So the first thing is, we have to work quickly. Things are obviously moving at an accelerated pace, and you can feel the velocity in the industry, both on the hardware and the enabling software stacks. And I've made a note, at the beginning of the year that we would start seeing, one new significant device, a month in May, and that was true. Now it's almost one a week. And I think that, we're going to see more and more enablement on the hardware side. So we're working quickly on our end to, address things from the network point of view. And we just recently announced a couple of days ago, collaboration with Ericsson to try to standardize the way that the network operates services for XR use cases. We're working towards standardizing precise positioning. As you all know, GPS is a terrible way to try to localize somebody. So we've been working to develop new technical ways that we can enable more precise positioning, which is obviously very valuable for AR use cases. And then I've been working for 5-6 years now on edge computing and mesh computing initiatives within Deutsche Telekom, which actually have spun out into a separate company, which is operating on a global service that a lot of telcos are going to be using over the next year or so to try to enable more real-time XR stuff. In fact, one of my projects I'm doing with NVIDIA will be showing in about a week, and I'll make sure everybody gets a link to that so you can read about it. Obviously, standards are really important. As a telco, we get involved in a lot of standards committees, and I think really important is the ability to create a consistent method for users to journey through metaverses. And so, whether it's a protocol standard like I propose here, meta:// or HTSP:// it doesn't matter, but having some sort of a universal approach we think is very important. I was a founding member of the Open AR Cloud Foundation and Alina is, I think, here in the call. And so, working to build a single index AR cloud system so that everybody can have their different AR clouds, but we can create a consistent way for developers and users to utilize those to find where they are and to localize content assets themselves and experiences. We work on several standards committees, and there's many standards committees people who are present here, so we won't get into all the details of which standards committees we're involved in, but the goal of these is to try to create collaborative thinking between telcos, network equipment developers, software technology companies, and benefit the ecosystem as a whole with a good, well thought out approach to solving certain problems or enabling certain capabilities. So we continue to do that. Deutsche Telekom is a German company, and as such, we have fairly strong data privacy regulations, even beyond GDPR. German law is very, very carefully focused on protecting the user And so we as a telco are very mindful of that from the beginning, you know, sort of like thinking security first, we think in terms of user privacy first. And we think this is really important also in combination, and I'm jumping a bullet in terms of user data management, identity management, and enabling a different way of thinking. Instead of users clicking a checkbox that says, sure, I'll accept the give away the untold metadata about myself to use in untold ways that I can't read through a 55-page legal contract that I don't understand. Instead, we think it's important to start thinking in terms of, here's my metadata, and I'm going to use a smart contract mechanism to define what I'm happy with in terms of allowing others to utilize that data. And I also have a clear understanding of the quid pro quo that I'm going to get in terms of functionality and services. So it's no longer a blind trust, but an overt clarity that we operate on. So a lot of the work that we're doing right now is trying to implement all of these efforts to create a standard experience for our users. I'm really happy to be part of this effort.
Thank you, Terry.
Terry, for being able to help us frame from your perspective as well. And Ben, I apologize. Yes, it is Neil. Thank you, okay. Neil. And Neil, thank you so much for your leadership, and Terry as well for helping make this possible.
Of course. And it's a pleasure to be here. So my name's Neil Trevett. My day job's at NVIDIA, but I'm here as Khronos president. So, and we have so many folks here working on such a broad range of topics. And I think most of us are here because we all believe passionately that wide cooperation is going to be the only way to build the metaverse. And so it's a pleasure and an honor to be here amongst like minds. And of course, cooperation works best when there is effective communication. And so a big shout out to Ben and Evo, who have taken initiative here to bring us all together and create this opportunity, I think, to discover how we can best coordinate our activities and our efforts. From the Khronos perspective, now we are obviously big believers, we're a standards organization, so we're big believers in the power of open interoperability standards to help build the metaverse by making essential technologies pervasively available. That's what standards are all about. Every standards organization has a particular area of focus and expertise, and Khronos's role as a standards organization is creating the lower level standards that connect hardware and software. And so we're working hard to fulfill that, and we regard it as a responsibility to the industry, with standards that are relevant to the metaverse. For example, 3D APIs like WebGL and Vulkan, OpenXR to drive XR devices, and closely related file formats like GLTF, which we think is fast becoming the foundational format for interoperable metaverse 3D assets. But Khronos is just one standards organization. There are many more, and they all have their own area of expertise. And the metaverse is going to need many things to interoperate on a scale that we've never attempted before as a whole industry. And so we're going to need a constellation of standards from dozens, maybe even hundreds of standards organizations and initiatives around the industry. And all those standards and initiatives will not only need to work in isolation, they all now need to work together. So Khronos, like many organizations here, I'm sure, are really seeking to reach out to understand how we can best be a good partner in this larger web of cooperation. And from our own example, we already have good, well-established relationships with other groups such as the W3C and their WebXR working group is leveraging WebGL and OpenXR and GLTF. But there are emerging areas where it's less clear who we should be working with and how we should organize that cooperation. I'll give one example. So with GLTF, there are things that Khronos can do. Now, we have the membership quorum and the expertise, for example, to define next generation of realistic materials, behaviors, animations, to really enable the baseline mechanics of interoperable metaverse avatars. And anyone who wants to be involved, please come join us. But we are not the right forum to define standards for example, crypto, NFTs, virtual currencies. That's not our area of expertise. But GLTF is going to need to have the hooks and connections into that whole ecosystem. So we have a connect point with the GLTF ecosystem, but who do we connect to and how? So it would be great from our perspective if a group like this could help us all construct a map of standards and initiatives around the industry so we can find the right connect points and identify gaps where no one has the ball, and I'm sure there are some. And my perspective is definitely not to try and mandate the direction that any one company or initiative should go, but rather enable and encourage Darwinian ground-up efforts by enabling us all to find the cooperative partnerships that we need, to be an effective part of this larger landscape. And lastly, I do agree with Ben that a discussion forum like this can become rather defocused. And so it is, I think, an effective way to pick some specific goals that we can work towards together to keep things grounded and productive. And Metaversal traversal, seems like a good one. There are so many aspects to that. The runtime protocols, the interoperable assets and avatars are just two. So I think, having that as a goal will seem certain to catalyze some good cooperation and connections. So that was what I wanted to say. And I hope Khronos gets a chance to work, with many of you here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neil, for your leadership across the board, both at Khronos and within this community. And I hope that we will find many different ways to test that expansion and extension of the GLTF spec across many different worlds. So whether you are at a game platform or a specific virtual world, or you're just trying to figure out where this might fit into your R&D, please follow up with Neil and the whole Khronos group. And next, I believe we have Chris Wilson joining us from W3C. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. So I'm Chris Wilson. Full disclosure, my day job is working for Google, but today I'm here as a co-chair of the Immersive Web Working Group and community groups at the W3C. And I wanted to share my screen very briefly just to talk through what it is that I am talking about. Give me 1 second to find the right one. There we go. So the Immersive Web Working Group and Community Group are a paired set of groups to incubate and standardize features for providing open and interoperable access to XR devices and features. I want to be clear, this is really like the lower level access to what the metaverse will be built on. It's getting consistent exposure for things like the gamepad controllers, or not just gamepads, but any kind of controller, visual devices, how the views on AR modules work, how to hit test in AR, doing overlays and different layers of display in these virtual worlds. And at the same time, we do a lot of incubation of new ideas and features. I would say that right now, I wanted to point to one that has been somewhat languishing for a little while, which is on navigation, which speaks to the core of this whole metaverse problem, the portal problem. And the navigation idea was that we needed some way to let, right now a WebXR session is owned by whatever site it's on, whoever built this sort of core experience. And we recognized that we definitely wanted in VR or AR navigation, the ability to jump from one world to another or one space to another without going back and starting over, because there's a lot of security and privacy implications in WebXR. There are a lot of security and privacy implications across the board. Like, these are clear through all of the other discussions we've been having too. And with the web in particular, we want to be really clear that we have to have this sort of safety and user first focus, I guess, overall. So I did want to point out, excuse me, I did want to point out the community group is open to all. The working group is open to W3C members. As one of the co-chairs, we can usually work this out anyways, but I do want to encourage people, you can come and participate here, and we can drive things here. We also are a pretty open community. A number of people who work in the immersive groups are heavily working in other places like Khronos, for example. And so it's very kind of interactive there. Overall, I think there's a lot of opportunity here. There are a lot of hard problems to solve. We've been focused primarily on the lower levels of getting this open access, but I think we're starting to step past that now, which is great. And I think that was all that I had.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm curious, what are the biggest questions your community are holding together right now? Where's your R&D taking you?
Mm-hmm. So I think the biggest questions for us now are how to get the next level of adoption. And we've been very focused on, first, for a number of years, just building a platform for VR that can work across devices, across operating systems, across the web. And believe me, getting things to fit in the security and privacy, I don't want to say constraints, it's the guarantees of the web, has been a major challenge. And trying to make this a very vendor neutral space while still enabling all the power of the devices that we're seeing come on the market, and the next round after that, and the next round after that. I think the biggest challenge right now is that we are at a place where we need to get enough adoption and people building these experiences to sink all of the effort in to solve the next set of problems. And all of the things that any of you might think of when you think of the metaverse and what it takes to get that up and running, we've probably discussed in this context before. Like, how do you deal with having an open and shared like geography that somehow no one owns? Like, these are very hard questions, and they're actually shared values, I think, across this group and a lot of the people here.
Yes, and figuring out how we begin to map and track these dynamic things in a participatory and collaborative way is going to be the ongoing work of this community. So thank you, Chris, for your leadership from the Immersive Web Group. And I tried to give people a bit of a sample of how W3C working groups sort of fit together. We do overlap somewhat. So. Yeah. Whether you're into the WebXR spec or looking at accessibility, looking at how that overlaps with spatial web and other groups as well. Yes. And I believe there are some overlaps with IEEE, and we're going to be bringing up Dr. IEEE, and I apologize, you are joining us from the IEEE side of this constellation of standards and norms. Could you share a little bit of what you've been working on?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Yuan. My daily job is leading several startups, labs, and ventures working on enabling technologies for XR and the Metaverse. But today I'm wearing the hat of the chair of IEEE VR and AR Standards Committee. So I do support the idea of interoperability and standards as a very important infrastructure to support the much bigger ecosystem for and growth for Metaverse. I think it would at least benefit three aspects or three group of stakeholders. First of all, for developers, such kind of interoperability and standards would make their lives easier. Of course, so they don't have to spend too much effort in developing different codes for different proprietary platforms. And also second, I believe for content providers or content generators, it's very important that the interoperability and the standards could make their efforts much more cost efficient and enable an open ecosystem for more kinds of business opportunities across different platforms. And the last but not least, for consumers, such kind of interoperability and the standards would give them much more richness in terms of the content and experiences that they can access. And also, we need the standards and to ensure that their experiences could have enough safety, security, privacy, and ethics. So today, IEEE's VR and AR Standards Committee, we have several efforts, including two working groups, namely IEEE VR and AR working group and IEEE AR on mobile devices working group, working on several different projects, not only technical standards, but also non-technical standards, such as content rating, things like that. We also have two groups. One is named IEEE Global Initiative on Ethics of Extended Reality, and another one is IEEE WAN and AI Advisory Board. The two groups are assisting with standards related activities such as pre and post standardization efforts. So I would like to say that so far IEEE does not have direct involvement or formal liaison relationship with all the other standards development organizations in the area of XR and the Metaverse. But I personally support the concept and approach of WebEx and the XR and the Metaverse, and believe that it would be instrumental to help grow the ecosystem and improve the consumer acceptance of XR and the Metaverse in general. And as far as I know, the standards that have been developed or are being developed within IEEE do not overlap with the efforts in other deals, but are indeed supplemental to them, as they are addressing different layers, different aspects, or different problems of XR and the Metaverse. So I think it would make a lot of sense to the XR and the Metaverse industry if there could be more collaborations between IEEE's VR and AR standards activities and other SDOs. All those standards are collectively building blocks that we would need to create an open and promising XR and Metaverse ecosystem. So that's my humble opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your insight and also for setting the stage for that collaboration to thrive between these groups, because we do need to sort out which pieces we are holding and where we can come together and align and then communicate those standards effectively to the rest of the community. So thank you. Well, let's stay in touch around how to do that next layer of collaboration. And I think we're going to continue to explore that in these other conversations. Patrick from Cesium is going to be joining us next. And Patrick, I am just so impressed with your work over there. I'm excited to see what you've been working on in terms of both R&D and the larger frameworks and how these fit together.
Wow, yeah, thank you so much, Evo, and thanks to you and Ben for having me today and for organizing this great group. I love the vision, I love the energy, I love the values here today. So as Evo said, I'm Patrick Cozzi, I'm from Cesium, and our work is to build a platform for 3D geospatial. I love standards, and I also love the collaboration among standards groups. And I've seen a theme already thus far today. For the last 10 years or so, I've worked with Khronos, with folks like Neil and Robert on GLTF specifically for efficient runtime 3D assets. And our work at Cesium has been to apply that to geospatial, right? So we're really interested in all the scanned models that are being created, these digital twins of the real world. You know, you see today, we see LiDAR, we see photogrammetry, we see drones, satellites, aircrafts, and we're getting so much 3D content scanned from the real world, but it's still quite a challenge to make that efficient, to disseminate in an interoperable way to all sorts of runtimes for 3D experiences and for Metaverse experiences. So in addition to working with Khronos, we work with another standards group called OGC, Open Geospatial Consortium, and they do many of the standards in the mapping and geospatial space. If you've heard of like WMTS for imagery tiles, or CDB in the modeling and simulation world. I saw some folks talking about IDSIC, for example, in the chat. So we've done an OGC community standard called 3D tiles that applies a lot of that spatial subdivision and tiling ideas to GLTF. So you could take, you know, think of a city scale model of London or New York, and then you have every block, you have every building, you have the interior of a building, you have the exterior, you have the basements, you have the doors, you have the triangles, you have the textures, and you also have the metadata, right? What is concrete? What is glass? Light will interact with them differently. What's a door? What direction does the door open? And we're working on efficient spatial data structures and then applying existing compression techniques so that we can take these massive worlds and then disseminate them in a fully open way. So about 10 years ago, I did start the Cesium.js project, which is an open source WebGL engine, but now we're also utilizing game engines such as Unreal Engine. So our interest really is in taking these massive models from the real world and then being able to spatially index and disseminate them in an open and interoperable way. And then one last thing is we also very much believe in authentic education. And I think Marc Petit, I think who's speaking next from Epic, he and I just started a podcast called Building the Open Metaverse, where we're trying to give a voice to technologists, like everyone on this call, to share their experience building the metaverse in an open and interoperable way. So super happy to be here. Looking forward to the rest of it. Thank you, Evo.
Patrick, thank you so much for your amazing work. I've been meeting with teams using your technology, for example, around digital twins projects, around mapping water and ecosystems in Los Angeles. I think there are phenomenal real world implications to the work that you're doing. And hopefully we can help drive the collaboration across the open metaverse to begin that easier flow between our communities. So thank you for being here today. And Marc, I'm excited to hear more about how the two of you are building the open metaverse together.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, Patrick and I, so my day job is to run Unreal Engine at Epic Games. It's also my night job, and I moonlight with Patrick to this, try to help the community with, the conversation around the open metaverse, because we believe at Epic, and you've heard Tim Sweeney, being very, very clear about the necessity of it to be open. So let me summarize, the few initiatives that are going on at Epic right now. So you're aware of Fortnite. We think Fortnite should become a beautiful corner of the metaverse. It's about social entertainment. It's social first. It's about fun. It's a place where we do a lot of experiments about a true creator economy. The very modest platform, and allowing people, Fortnite creative, to create their own games and make a living out of it. The economy is not fully developed, but you can see where we're going with user-generated content. On Fortnite, we're going to be connecting our games. So when we think about transportable experience, we want to eat our own dog food, and Rocket League, Fall Guys, and Fortnite should be a practical example of carrying your belongings across. But probably less known is our Epic Online Services initiative. It's a set of free online services for game and experience developers that provide access to the Epic ID identity system. We're big fans of federated identity. You don't need an Epic Games account to play Fortnite. You can play with your Nintendo account, your PlayStation account. So we do implement federated identity, and we're opening up that model. All of our identity system stuff is, our social graph is open and available for free. Can download it on the internet today. It comes with voice chat and a number of nifty features to actually create a good experience for users. We also do the Unreal Engine, which is my my focus at Epic. We're not an open source project by any means. By our source code on the internet, we try to be extremely open. We have a very, very liberal license agreement along with the Unreal Engine that implements our business model, where we don't monetize the tools, but just the experiences and the games. We support GLTF. We love GLTF. We're big believers in GLTF. We also had big investment from technology and from support in OpenXR, because we believe that's going to be huge. Top-notch implementation around USD. Through our mega grant programs, we've supported all of the above. USD, but also Blender and Godot, because we believe that we need to have an ecosystem, and there could be commercial products, but also open source products. So we put our money where our mouth is. We are, we're very interested in O3DE. We want to see where this is going, and you'll see us. We're embracing web technologies with our Sketchfab technology. Now we can not only publish the 3D content and create experience on using the quote unquote proprietary Unreal Engine, but you can also do it on the open web using WebGL technology, using Sketchfab. So we're trying to create, again, an ecosystem as open as possible. And in our interaction, we're very eager to be open, but we're busy. There's a lot of opportunity, and we have a bias for execution more than for conversation. So I'm here to try to understand, how we get pragmatic and start to do things that actually make a difference. So So I look forward to engage and working with you guys and make sure that we keep the angle around, small wins and getting shit done.
I am amazed at how many folks come to our industry through your experiences and through playing, starting in worlds like Fortnite. And so thank you for helping us see how that becomes a way in that can be a lifetime of creator support and care. I think ways in which to support young creators and helping us build the open metaverse, there's so many strategies, and I'm excited to see where we can begin to build more programs because, for example, within the OMI community, we see so many young people, and I'm getting, dozens of requests a week right now for mentorship and helping to build that open metaverse space. So I hope there's going to be much collaboration there in terms of supporting our next generation of creators as well. Thank you. Thank you so much, Marc, and excited to listen to the podcast. Alina from OpenAR Cloud is going to be joining us next. And Alina, thank you for joining us rather late for your time, I suppose, but glad you're here with us.
No worries, and I'm happy to add a bit of a European perspective to the mix. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Ben, and the hosts who brought us all together. To have this important discussion. Just quickly for those who actually don't know me, I'm Alina. I'm Director of Communications of OpenAR Cloud Association, but focusing on our EU entity, OpenAR Cloud Europe, that I've been leading and kicking off almost over a year ago. We are basically a global nonprofit driving development of open and interoperable technology, data, standards, and best practices. We actually know the Cesium team because we've been working over a year now on our open universal geopose standard that's been built within the OGC, and it's actually just a couple of weeks ago now also for public feedback. So we are working forward, with fast forward to actually make this be a universal standard. And basically we all know, and why we came together is what we've seen emerged over the years is we are building this sort of ecosystem, and it's been driven by various companies, but what we are actually lacking is the sort of universal language. And so, through over a year, we are now working on the reference implementation of our open spatial computing platform, which we are now testing in various test beds. And that's the other thing from a European perspective. We see a lot of digital twin projects emerging out. And what we're currently actually facing, and that leads basically to what our EU entity has been focusing the last couple of months, is when we talk to those various test beds or city-scaled infrastructure, where actually one of the European biggest ones just kicked off beginning of the year, which is the Connected Urban Twin project. That's actually going to be a digital twin ecosystem connected and built by Hamburg, Leipzig, and Munich, kicking off to have not just all this, also this sort of siloed digital twin city projects, but also working towards sort of how can we build an underlying ecosystem, because when you look at cities, you have thousands of use cases. On the other hand, we are also dealing with various sort of challenges. We are actually on a point where current law can't be adapted to this world that we are creating, which because it's driven by the convergence of technologies. And so, we are scenarios. And that sort of led to EU-funded project proposal that we've been working on for the last 5 months with various researchers. How can we adopt sort of moral dilemmas or ethical dilemmas from the AI industry into this XR spatial metaverse ecosystem that we are building. So there are various challenges that we are also facing when it comes to legislation, and even with the cities, you know, cities gain funding and they actually don't really know what to do. And I think we as experts, we need to also guide those cities, because when we look at those cities, most of them, they're really sitting on data gold mines, and they don't want to rely on monopolies or big corporations, right? Because there's a lot of stake. And so this is also the European perspective that I want to add to this conversation is there's also a lot of stake here. So yeah,
absolutely. And so we are describing the individual and the small group experience, but we're also describing the city and the communal and the larger policy side of this conversation as this rolls up into something broader. And the EU has been addressing questions around regulation policy differently than other places. And it seems like it's moving faster there than potentially in other places around the world. Do you sense that as well?
Yeah, I sense it, especially with the proposal that we've been submitting just like 14 days ago, which is basically, I mean, yeah, we are quite a small continent, but due to those various cultures, we also have sort of an advancement. And also due to the history when it comes to ethics and privacy and all these things, we've been actually thinking of our proposal actually is not just only building those building blocks, so not just add another regulation that ends up in the drawer, so make it really, yeah, adoptable. That's why we also have a support from one of the smart city test beds. So if we gain the funding, we actually want to make sure that those building blocks are also adaptable. So it's not just another regulation that ends up in the drawer after 3 years of funding.
Right. So this is where coordination across industries is really going to be key. And we need to follow up. I think Kent gave us a great link to the AR/VR Policy Summit, which follows in greater detail on the policy issues. So thank you so much for bringing these issues to the table. We're going to be bringing a lot to follow up on here. And so both on the policy side and on the open air cloud, we will absolutely look at that, how we fit together there. Dr. Jun Wang, thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited to hear more of what you are bringing to us here today. Can you tell us just a little bit of your work and how it fits together with this open metaverse structure?
Yes, absolutely. So thanks, Evo, for hosting today's meeting, and thanks, Ben, for inviting Futurewei to participate in today's discussion. So my name is Jun Wang, a Senior Vice President at Futurewei Technologies. Futurewei is a US company founded in 2001, and we're committed to support openness, inclusiveness, no matter it's related to standard, open source, or ecosystems. So I agree with Ben, Evo, and everyone here today. Interoperability within Metaverse needs to be secured. And we have a dedicated business development engineering resources here in the US at Futurewei to support open source software, the awareness and the growth of open source ecosystem. One of our important goals is to help increase the market availability of contents and experiences based upon WebXR, which is why, or the reason why we have supported the WebXR Summit series this year. In a nutshell, Futurewei will continue to support WebXR and any interoperability initiatives related to Metaverse, which can help secure innovation, user experience, and business opportunities for wider XR industry. We look forward to next steps, and we plan to take a proactive role in the efforts. So again, thanks, Ben, Evo, and everyone. I actually also
Kent Bai, who has been a fantastic colleague in this space for the last 5 years. Oh, fantastic. I love Kent's slides. Kent, take it away. You go for it.
All right. So my name's Kent Bai. I do the Voices of VR podcast. And we've been talking about maps and trying to see how, this thing matches with that, how economics fits into crypto and how identity. And so I'm just going to give from my perspective, some of the stuff that I've been looking at, in particular, some of the themes coming up, and hopefully provide some maps that may be helpful to help make sense as we move forward. So some sense-making frameworks for metaverse ethics. So I do the Voices of VR podcast since May of 2014. Most recent podcast, well, not the most, but a recent one that I did last week, Tony Parisi's Metaverse Manifesto, the Unpacking the 7 Rules for the Metaverse. I created this graphic and then posted it to Twitter. These 7 rules, I'm sure everyone has seen by now. And then I got this response from Erica Southgate, who is from Australia, does a lot of stuff with ethics. She says, from these 7 rules, she said, well, the metaverse should uphold human rights. And, when I first looked at Tony's rules, I was like, well, these are really low level rules. Like if we're making protocols with the Khronos group, then how is the Khronos group going to like embed human rights into the technology? And I was resistant at first, but then I thought, you know what, maybe she's right. Maybe when we go through these rules at the bottom here, Tony says the metaverse is the internet, but it's also expanding the internet of what we know the internet to be, which means that there's going to be more spatial embodied presence. And one of the things that Tony said in his essay was that he hasn't really figured out how governance is going to work. And I think in some ways, when we look at issues of governance and ethics, we have to start to think about, well, how do we embed human rights into these protocols from the lowest level? So I just want to give some context for the ways that I have been thinking about this after talking to lots of people about ethics and privacy. Lawrence and Lessig's pathetic dot theory is really super helpful for breaking up, but there's these, 3 or 4 different sociocultural dials between the cultural norms, the laws that you can set, not only laws within a community, but also laws, the federal laws and state laws, but then the market dynamics and the technological architecture and the code. And as I thought about it, I realized that you could actually take some of these and start to put them into sort of a mereologically nested context. That's they're both individual entities, but they're also a part of a larger context. And just to elaborate that a little bit, you have the culture is the largest context. And so that's the value system, the ethics, the human rights frameworks. You have the laws that are set by the government or the laws within a community, the rules that you have. You have the economic and market dynamics of how people exchange value. And then you have the design principles that are happening within that context. And then you have the user experience, and then the application, operating system, and the hardware and technology. And so you have the human kind of in between the technology and these larger contexts here. And this has been really helpful of mapping out different aspects of, say, security engineering, or whether or not you're looking at different levels of whether or not you're looking at the application code level or the user experience level, or maybe this is something that needs to be a design level and ethical principles. Maybe there needs to be social norms or legally mandated laws that are set. So this is yet another way of taking that same concept of saying, well, there's human rights principles that feed into the laws, and those laws feed into how the companies are running, but also these design principles that are informed by the human rights, but also inform the laws, but also inform the companies and these experiences. And so as we start to think about maps for how things start to fit into each other, the thing that we have right now is that a lot of the actual hardware technology is within the context of this market dynamic of these companies, that the hardware is actually within the context of that market dynamic. When we look at privacy, it just gets really super confusing. So when we start to think about, just this protocol, we're not going to solve privacy by the protocol level, but there are things that we can start to look at, let's say in the hardware, homomorphic encryption or things like that, where we can start to do that at the lower level. But this is just to say that, we kind of need all these things working together, including new laws and new human rights frameworks like neuro rights. So that's just to set this larger context as we're having these discussions. Just to throw out some of the different human rights frameworks that are really popular right now, the neuro rights frameworks to have the right to identity, right to agency, right to mental privacy, right to fair access to mental augmentation, the right to be free from algorithmic bias. This work that I did with the IEEE Global Initiative on the Ethics of Extended Reality is building on the XR Ethics Manifesto that I did back in October of 2019, which is trying to split up into all these different contexts. Identity is over here. And so when we think about identity and, resources and money and the medical context, a lot of the technology is within one of these contexts. Then, we could start to look at how these all break down into different dimensions. And in that, my XR Ethics Manifesto actually go into great detail, but I don't have time to dive into the wide variety of ethical and moral dilemmas with XR. But the point is that a lot of with the EFF at the RightsCon started to look at how do we bring in different aspects of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights or the Sustainable Development Goals, how we start to pull these in. Facebook has their own responsible innovation dimensions that they start to have, where this is their approach for how they start to navigate all these different contextual dimensions. There's also different dimensions of privilege, domination, or oppression in terms of the diversity and inclusion, and making sure that whatever systems we have, that we're being inclusive and not propagating different aspects of oppression. And there's different ways that even the technology is at different scales of being ready and being fully baked. And so it's either custom built, handcrafted, or this commodity open source. And so there's different scales in which that you can map this out and say worldly mapping. So I think just overall, there's just different ways that we could start to sort of map out the landscape where things are at, but also map them across these different contextual domains. But I guess the provocation that I come back to is, if we are talking about these low-level protocols, it's very easy to just focus on the technology in the absence of all these other questions that haven't been yet figured out. And I guess it's just to advocate, to start to think about, well, how do you embed ethics and human rights into everything that you do at every single dimension of this level?
Wow, Kent, we're going to breathe for a second and just absorb all of that. Wow, thank you for helping us contextualize a huge conversation in what was maybe 5, 6, 7 slides. So thank you for that. We're going to absolutely revisit how all of these pieces fit together. And I think you have set the stage for what will happen in these ongoing conversations. This is obviously the first of an ongoing series of conversations on this. And I want to pass it very quickly to Daniel so that we can stay close to on time here. Daniel and the Virtual World Society, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Evo. Thank you so much. Listening to that and the previous speakers, we're in such good hands in this company. So hats off to Kent for making sense of all of that. Thank you. And while I would love to be to work with Dr. Jun Wang, I think I'm a different Daniel than you'd meant. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Daniel Dyboski Bryant, Associate Executive Director of the Virtual World Society and Founder and Director of Educators in VR. And the Virtual World Society, whose mission is to uplift and connect humanity with the technologies of our day, wholeheartedly supports this initiative for a joint declaration on portals, because XR is shaping up to be the greatest learning and connecting medium of our times, if we can build it right. And we believe that this important work will benefit humanity by enabling more meaningful and impactful access to experiences, information, learning, creative tools, and economic opportunity. So we're squarely coming from the human and humanity side of this discussion. Without interoperability, walled gardens and silo environments will severely limit our mission for education and social impact. Barriers and borders really need to be a thing of the past and not the future anymore. We need to build a future for all from the outset. The metaverse needs to be freely available and traversable for all, and interoperability is the key stepping stone for many aspects of such an open metaverse. And any safe and secure reduction in friction is always worth supporting. Being able to move freely from VR apps to WebXR and back is a fundamental requirement of an open future in XR, and also a foundation upon which of most of the other issues of the metaverse we want, such as privacy, security, commerce, and so on, will be built. There are clearly several technical, organizational, security, and other hurdles to overcome before we reach such a smooth metaversal traversal. I love that phrase. And it will probably take more time than we would all like. But that makes it imperative to start this conversation and bring the appropriate players together now to harness the metaverse's greatest potential for humans without repeating mistakes of the past. And for those of you who are interested, I posted a link to a symposium, learning lessons from the early days of the web, if you want to see it there. So this initiative of interoperability could not be better timed as well, as large corporations we saw yesterday are already openly laying claim to the metaverse. Some are indicating that they will support interoperability, yet it is unclear and even doubtful where their delivery on those statements will truly reflect the spirit and practice of cooperation and openness that we believe we have a right to. So on behalf of the Virtual World Society, as well as Educators in VR, we fully support the formulation of a joint declaration on portals at this juncture of the technology and the industry. And we're proud to be working alongside organizations such as this that are helping to build and shape our common digital future. So thank you, Evo. and Ben and your team for convening this initiative. And we hope to build on this collaboration to help address some of the other challenges that need to be overcome on the road to the metaverse we all want to experience and to be proud of as a net positive for humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you for the amazing work of the Virtual World Society. I hope that we have some opportunity to dig deeper into the R&D and how we can support each other on those sort of nuts and bolts of code, right? How can we do more work together effectively? And I think reducing those barriers and reducing the friction across our industry is one of those things that we've come here together to do today.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I'm going to, yes, and I just want to honor that we have so many industry experts here who have helped create these spaces over the last decades now, Avi being one of them. And Avi, you were partially responsible for my entrance into this world indirectly, but I'm grateful. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure, and I'm really excited everybody has stepped up to these really hard requirements for collaboration. It's something I just figured I'd put up a slide. Not all of you know me, and I don't, make that many rounds and do that much public speaking. So I figured I would just give a little bit of who I am for the people who don't know me.
We're getting a duplicate of your screen share there. Could you?
Let's try. Why don't I just do it? I'll just do it without presenting. It'll just be in the raw form. So as long as you see, let's scale it up a little bit. Is that fine?
Yep.
Big enough?
Yeah, I think we were getting quicker.
Yeah, you know what? I couldn't figure out how to have it share the secondary screen instead of the main one, but this will work. Some of the things that have been previously talked about are really near and dear to my heart. Also, we started Keyhole a long time ago, and I'll give you just a few details for those of you who don't know it and or may have seen a recent Netflix show that cast a really bad light on it. The goal was to actually build a geospatial open platform so that anybody could bring their content to the earth. And that we had a standardized format called KML. And the goal was, we'd provide the planet, you provide the data, you bring whatever you want. It was meant to be very open. And I'm glad that there are new efforts to extend some of that functionality. For anybody who has seen the Netflix show and is curious as to what actually happened, I have a Medium article that will go into more detail. I didn't want to spend too much time on it today, but I am trying to correct some impressions wherever they come up. But the main thing I want to talk about today was, the standards and the difficulties, especially around portals. I wanted to talk to that specifically as someone who thinks about the big picture, but as well as a technologist who tries to be very practical in terms of how to implement things. I'm going to give a couple of observations and suggestions. I would expect that for anybody who's already been working on portals, this will be really obvious. There won't be anything too new in here, but for those of you who tend to think at a higher concept level, this might hopefully inform some of your thoughts as well going into the future of it. This is an old quote from Twitter that I've taken a screenshot of. Ironically, it's a screenshot. When interoperability fails, this is what we're left with. We're left with taking screenshots of each other and sharing that. It's the only way that we can really bring these sites together. So we have a lot of work to do to try to make it so that we can actually do better. This is nothing new. If you think about how the web was built, teleporting in some sense is like clicking links, or you should be able to see a link to another spatial site, click on it and enter, but it could get a little more complicated than that. Embedding references is another kind of interoperability. We should be able to pull content if it's available, openly. We should be able to pull it into our pages and build up worlds that are composites of other things, just like you can do on the web today. And then there's this concept that's probably less well understood called iframes. It was added a little bit later to browsers, but it was meant to be a sandbox within a page that you can bring other foreign content in and have it safely run within a sandbox that didn't have access to what was outside of it. And that's a concept that's really relevant to this kind of portal, the kind that you can see through that acts like it's a 3D portal. And that's the part I want to talk about the most, because I've done quite a lot of work on these in the last 30 years. And there are some easy ways to do these and some hard ways to do this. But of course, when we say portals, this is what people think about as a doorway of some form. It could be a circle, it could be whatever, something that we could actually pass through. And that's less like a link because it's sort of existing there before you go through it. Links only really happen when you click on them. There's not much that gets preloaded. Maybe there's a hover effect, but there's really not that happens ahead of time. So one of the issues that comes up with portals is, first of all, it's very complicated. You need to solve almost every issue with interoperability to make portals work well. Maybe it's a good starting point, but it's also a lot to bite off on a first try. You have to think about, well, if we are going to do this looking through the door effect, do we have to bring in assets from another world into the current world so that we can render those assets and see something in 3D through the door? Do we have to inject foreign geometry and shaders? It's really hard. And typically where these things fail is in the test matrix. When you wind up having a solution to a problem that's so hard that you can't test all the combinations, you might as well, stop at that point and say, if we can't test it, it's going to fail in the field. It's maybe not as robust of a solution as we would like. And when you start thinking about animated or scripted objects being through the portal, that you need to see these things, all bets are off because now the runtimes need to be consistent. The code needs to be consistent across worlds, not just the assets. It's incredibly hard to do. So I want to offer a simpler way to solve this. It isn't necessarily the best way. It isn't the way that almost everyone's going to want to do this, but it's a way that works. And also, I think it's worth thinking about some of the other issues that border on ethics and accessibility and things like, where do the portals go? If anybody can create a portal, do they use it as a way to cheat? Can I use a portal to get into the past the boss level, into the loot room and go steal the loot? Or does it show up in someone's private space? These are all important issues to address. I think also, the fact that the accountability systems may be very different, the moderation systems. And so if we can see and hear across these portals, it opens up a lot of cans of worms for how do we deal with the issues that arise from activity across the portals. So here's one simple way to imagine this. And to get animation, I might be able to, if I hit play, it's going to go to the wrong screen. So I'll try this preview thing. So this is the simplest idea, and then the animation will kind of work. The idea is you don't actually need to get 3D content from the next site across the portal in order to make it look 3D. What you really want to do is have a proxy avatar go ahead and log in to the next site. And the login, the authentication is actually important because if somebody's not authenticated to see through the portal, then they shouldn't see through the portal, right? You could decide to make this generic and work for everybody, but in general, you want to obey the rules of those systems. But here the idea is you send this proxy ahead of time, and its position exactly matches the position of your current avatar with respect to the portal. It doesn't matter where it is in the rest of the world, it just matters with respect to the portal. And you go ahead and just film it. You just capture a 3D view as a 2D, maybe audio video stream, and send that back to the world. And if you do this right, and if the head positions are coordinated, the only thing you need to send is the position of the head, and the only thing you need to get back is the video from the other world. And you can make it look like you are seeing through the portal, but all the rendering is done separately. You don't have to share assets, you don't have to share anything except the stream. And I wanted to just give us an example of, when you start to get pragmatic about how to implement these things, this could work for almost any site. All it really has to support is this API for creating a proxy avatar that is only there for purposes of rendering and not there for gameplay or any other thing. And other people in the world would see it. It would just be an invisible camera in a sense. This doesn't mean it's a perfect solution because, of course, we'd like to be able to share assets and avatars and those things, but those are hard. And it also doesn't solve all the security questions because this exact technique could be used in the way that web bugs are used today. People could start creating 1-pixel portals in order to see you and what you're doing in advance of you doing anything, as if you, and it would be even worse if it automatically logged in for you into other worlds. So anyway, those are some of the important practical things to be thinking about when we actually go and try to solve these portals. I wanted to give that perspective of somebody who's tried to do this in various places in the past. So I think my time is up, and thanks.
Thank you so much, Avi. And I'm grateful for your continued leadership in figuring out how to bring these people together and how to figure out how to connect the constellations as Neil was describing earlier. I think you've got fantastic vision on how to begin sort of creating these sort of concentric councils of a sort that can do this hard work of intermediating the details. Terry, thank you for joining me up here. And I believe we are going to set the stage for what's coming next. Now, this is the first of a series of conversations that we are queuing up here. Terry, would you give us a little bit of context? Obviously, what we're doing here is building the relational tissue necessary to hear each other and what we need to do in order to come together, whether that's privately in back channels and in small groups and councils and working groups. So Neil, Terry, Ben, thank you for making this happen. And let's talk about next steps.
So Ben, perhaps we could start with talking about the calendaring that we have planned.
Yes, so we are looking at having an event in early December. We want to continue this conversation around listening and cooperation. We'd like to invite the stakeholders of hardware and software companies, and particularly the XR platforms that support multi-user experiences, to come together and continue this conversation about cooperation and start the process of getting this open. It's very important what happened yesterday in terms of Mark Zuckerberg's announcement. Everybody's talking about how Meta and the name change is very important. What is really core is that he made a very public declaration in favor of interoperability. And if you listen to John Carmack's work as well, he actually laid down a gauntlet for next year. They want to hold this inside of this. And he specifically said that he wanted interoperability. So with Facebook's weight, with Meta's weight behind interoperability, we're hoping that we can all use this opportunity to come together. Neil?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's the thing I learned with, now they've called themselves Meta. We have to come up with a different name for the metaverse. Trademarks.
Metaverse.
Yes. I think, thank you for arranging the December meeting, and so we can keep this conversation going. And as we talked last time, it would be good to have interstitial conversations. So I think you have a Discord channel. Can we encourage everyone onto the Discord so we can keep the conversation?
By all means, I'll paste a link into the chat right now.
Yes.
Yeah, and we're also going to capture the chat so we can, get the knowledge shareable to everybody after the event. Yes. I think it's important that we have a lot of upcoming events that we can utilize through our network to socialize the idea of MetaDavos. The big one that's coming up, of course, is the Augmented World Expo in Santa Clara in November, and of course, as Dr. Wang mentioned, the Futurewei will be running an event there as well. But I think in our social discourse with people, maybe for the first time in 2 years, seeing them face to face, this is an opportunity for us to have some real concrete traction, in moving forward on this topic and not letting one vendor control the conversation. I think that's the most important thing. It's also an opportunity for us to kind of hold their feet to the fire in terms of some of the ideas. Are they really going to have open login? Are they really going to have true interoperability? Exactly how do they envision that happening? Or is it just within their own ecosystem, which was a comment that was brought up very early on today in the chat. So I think those are things that we need to, challenge people on, and also support, them thinking about it, because some people are just going to be reactive and not proactive. We need to create proactive attitudes about these issues.
Amen. Final thoughts, Evo.
I just want to thank you all, number one, for participating. Number two, just to give you a quick frame, we are going to be gathering in December. That invitation will be extended to those who aren't here today. So that includes folks from our friends at Game Engines and Platforms and the big Mang Fang, as you wish, companies, as well as independent creators. And we see that essential conversation for R&D happening here as we get down to brass tacks and get down to what we can physically do together. And obviously the digital is physical and real. And so we want to help make that real for everyone in January. We will be rolled up and shared with the AR/VR Council at Davos. 25 plus years ago, John Perry Barlow gave a declaration for the independence of cyberspace. I was with him for part of that time before he passed, and we spent some time rewriting those rules for the metaverse. And so I am moving in that direction, thinking about how we can encapsulate all that we're discovering to begin creating those sorts of ethics-centered, human rights-centered, but especially creator-centered movements together so that we can all thrive. And especially for the billions of creators who are going to come behind us, we want to make sure that they can do this work effectively together. So thank you for making the time to join us today. This is our time. I'm going to close it at 11 o'clock. We hope you will join us again in December and January for these MetaDevos conversations.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for making interoperability a focus in your own organizations. Keep us focused on the Discord as to what you're actually doing, and please reach out if you need R&D support, collaborators, or anyone to join your own projects.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day, everyone.
Keep it up.
Looking
Thanks.
forward to hearing more in December.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.